Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. In Chinese history, minority groups like the Xiongnu have always been a major threat to the Central Plains dynasties. Whenever the power of a Central Plains dynasty weakened, the Xiongnu would seize the opportunity to eye the land, attempting to replace the ruling dynasty and become the new rulers. As a result, the relationship between the Xiongnu and the Central Plains dynasties has been complex and ever-changing, involving battles, submission, peace treaties, and trade. It is worth mentioning that the women of the Xiongnu were very different from the women of the Central Plains. They were full of wild charm, with many Xiongnu women not only possessing great beauty but also having a strong innate temperament. However, in history, marriage alliances were often a common tactic used by the Central Plains dynasties to win over foreign tribes, to secure a brief peace. Rulers of the Central Plains would often marry their beautiful princesses off to distant lands, a practice that was not uncommon in history. One such example is Wang Zhaojun, who is regarded as one of the four beauties of ancient China. Her marriage alliance story and the tale of Zhaojun leaving the Han for the Xiongnu have been passed down through generations. However, it was extremely rare for Xiongnu women to marry into the Central Plains, especially in the eyes of the ancients, where it seemed that Xiongnu women could never enter the royal courts of the Central Plains. Even if they were as beautiful as fairies, they were still unlikely to be considered suitable partners. Why were Xiongnu women treated so differently? What were the underlying reasons for this? According to relevant historians, the Xiongnu, an ethnic group that played a significant role in Chinese history, lived in harsh, cold lands. They harbored a strong desire to invade the fertile lands of the Central Plains. Influenced by their nomadic lifestyle, they were more inclined to plunder than to develop agriculture. This way of life, centered on raiding, made the Xiongnu a continuous threat to the Central Plains dynasties. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, one of the most famous emperors in history, recognized the northern threat early on. In response to the Xiongnu invasions, he invested significant human and material resources into building the Great Wall. The Great Wall became the most important defense against northern invasions in later dynasties and a marvel of world architecture, continuously extended and rebuilt. During the Han Dynasty, the Xiongnu remained the only ethnic group capable of threatening the Han frontier. During the Han period, renowned generals like Hua Zubing and Wei Qing carried out heroic deeds and inflicted significant damage on the Xiongnu, leaving a glorious chapter in Chinese history. The term Feng Lang Ju Su, sealing the wolf and settling in the vast territory, became the highest honor for ancient generals. Throughout history, the Xiongnu were mostly at a disadvantage. As the Central Plains dynasties grew stronger, the Xiongnu had to retreat time and again, eventually expanding westward, even reaching Europe. Although the Xiongnu were exceptionally powerful in battle, Xiongnu women were not favored in the eyes of ancient scholars. Many ancient scholars derided Xiongnu women, believing they were not worthy of being called women. In some regions, there were even rumors that demonized Xiongnu women, claiming they were 8 feet tall, with 3 heads and 6 arms, and had a fierce, terrifying appearance. These stereotypes reflect the Central Plains society's rejection and prejudice against Xiongnu culture. As a result, many people from the Central Plains were even afraid of them. No matter how beautiful they were, Xiongnu women were not the first choice for men from the Central Plains. This was due to a huge cultural and customs gap between the two. Ancient Han society was primarily agrarian, and people viewed land as the foundation of survival. For most people, the pursuit of life was simply to hold on to a few acres of land and live a life free from hunger. Many farmers spent their entire lives on their small piece of land, with limited horizons and no access to a broader world. For them, land was everything, and their life goals were uncomplicated, leaving them little energy to focus on other matters. This relatively stable life also shaped certain characteristics in ordinary people. They were easily content, seeking a simple, stable life without the desire for wealth and power. Most were willing to accept life's hardships and live an ordinary life. Meanwhile, feudal etiquette and traditional culture deeply influenced societal views, especially the idea of favoring sons over daughters, which was particularly strong. The social status of women in ancient times was low, and their main tasks were to support their husbands, raise children, and manage household affairs. The education women received from childhood taught them that only obedience could ensure a peaceful life. They usually lacked independent opinions and were expected to be obedient and dutiful, serving as a virtuous wife at home. In the eyes of men in ancient central China, only those women who were gentle and submissive were considered ideal wives. If a woman showed any signs of rebellion or did not conform to traditional norms, she would face strong societal rejection and be seen as an unsuitable partner. In the eyes of ancient men, women had a low status and were even seen as objects that could be easily controlled. However, the situation was completely different for women among the Xiongnu. The Xiongnu were a nomadic people, and the status of women was relatively high. In fact, one could say that the Xiongnu people, to some extent, represented gender equality. As a nomadic tribe, the Xiongnu lived in an environment of constant migration, with the world being their home, broadening their horizons. This was in stark contrast to the male superiority, female inferiority mentality of central China. The Xiongnu believed that strength was the key to determining one's fate. Regardless of gender, only the strong could control their own destiny. And those who climbed to higher positions were considered true strong individuals. In the eyes of the Xiongnu, women's roles were not limited to managing the household. They could also, like men, take up weapons and become fierce warriors. The image of Xiongnu women was completely unacceptable to the people of central China. Because they were unrestrained, bold, and fearless, which was seen as heretical in the conservative society of central China. What was most difficult for the men of central China to accept was the Xiongnu women's loyalty concept. The combat strength of the Xiongnu people heavily relied on reproduction, with every woman being an extremely precious resource. During times of turmoil, men were often killed by enemies, leaving only women and children behind. And these people were seen as the future hope of the Xiongnu. However, the Xiongnu's ethical relationships were not accepted by the society of central China. For instance, among the Xiongnu, there were cases of brothers marrying each other's wives and sons inheriting their father's concubines, which, in the eyes of people from central China, were seen as huge acts of rebellion. And even today, such practices are difficult to tolerate. As a result, Xiongnu women grew disillusioned with traditional feudal etiquette. And men from central China could not accept their free-spirited, unrestrained personalities. Due to the vast cultural differences, a deep chasm always existed between Xiongnu women and central Chinese men. Their customs and values were completely different, and they could not tolerate each other's way of life or thinking. Ultimately, this mutual rejection and misunderstanding deepened the gap, leading to almost no real interactions between Xiongnu women and central Chinese men in history. It is worth mentioning that some argue the reason why Xiongnu women were long discriminated against might be because their appearance did not match the aesthetic standards of the people in central China. But is this view really accurate? The Xiongnu lived in the cold northern regions, where the long-lasting cold climate may have made the skin of Xiongnu women appear rough. But this does not necessarily mean their overall appearance was unattractive. In fact, the cold climate did not fully affect a person's beauty, as beauty is multifaceted, and the unique charm of Xiongnu women may not have been lost because of it. According to relevant historians, the reason why Xiongnu women were avoided by men from central China ultimately boils down to the huge difference in thoughts and values. Just like in modern times, when people fall in love, the initial attraction may be superficial, But what truly sustains a long-term relationship is the shared values and life philosophy. In modern society, it is no longer rare for people who genuinely love each other and are honest to be together. People now place more emphasis on mutual understanding and respect. No longer being limited by appearance, cultural differences, or social backgrounds. Therefore, the gap between Xiongnu women and Central Chinese men can ultimately be understood as a collision and conflict between different times and cultures. This is the History and Culture channel. Liking and subscribing are the greatest help and support to us. Thank you everyone and see you in the next time.